Now on Bloomsbury Radio, a discussion about politics. The views expressed in this programme are not necessarily those of Bloomsbury Institute or Bloomsbury Radio, and passions do run high, so there is fruity language.
Hello, I'm Nick Tyrone, neoliberal centrist dad, and thank you for anyone returning who's listened before. I have with me a very special guest, Nick Cohen. Former Observer, a writer, and now with a very successful Substack, which I suggest everyone checks out, and a great podcast as well, the Lowdown, which I have had the benefit of being on, and have had a wonderful time, and had some great chats with Nick, and I wanted to have him on, particularly in this of most momentous of times, given how much is happening. Particularly, we'll start, and then we'll see where we go with Trump, Zelensky, NATO. There's so much happening. I mean, I just was reading about Giorgia Meloni and her. She said this thing about how I was trying to get the gist of it. Basically, that there should be a sort of some version of Article 5 of NATO that pertains to Ukraine at the moment. I was trying to get the gist of it. Actually, I was literally reading it as I was coming in. That's how much news is happening. Anyway, welcome, Nick.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me on.
Let's start with just wider impressions of what's going on.
Well, you said it was momentous, and actually it is.
Yeah.
So often journalists throw around cliches like unprecedented and extraordinary, and it really is. The whole world order is changing. And essentially there are two responses to Trump, and they sound similar, but it's entirely different. The first is, and Keir Starmer's clinging on to this, is say, okay, we've just got to spend more on defence. Americans have had a point. We're free riding on American money, on American troops. We've got to spend more. And that just says, well, if we do that, it'll all be okay. Yep. If we do that, America, it doesn't want to defend Ukraine, but it will carry on defending Europe. We'll carry on getting all our intelligence cooperation and all the things we're not good at. Europe is not good at. Air support, intelligence, logistics you need to fight a battle. So that's Labour, and lots of European politicians are still clinging on to that. And you can see why. I don't blame them. It's terrifying.
It's terrifying. The alternative is terrifying.
American sports go up, but it is delusional. It is delusional. Option two is we just face up to the fact it's over. America is at least gone, maybe a hostile power. And look at the behaviour of Trump and Musk and Vance. That is not the behaviour of a friendly power. Pumping up rioters on the streets of Britain, pumping up Alternative for Deutschland, extreme right-wing group in Germany, cozying up to Putin and doing everything they can to denigrate Ukraine. So the logic of position two is we have to spend even more money, but we start running an independent European foreign and defence policy, which I think in the long run would be best for us. I think it would be a disaster for America, incidentally.
I agree.
I don't believe Donald Trump is making America great again in the slightest. He's massively weakening it. But you know what? That's America's problem,
Agreed.
Not our problem.
I guess what is our problem is, if I'm looking at what Starmer is doing at the moment, I understand what he's doing. He's trying to keep America basically as sweet as he can, as onside as he can, for as long as he can. That seems from the outside to be what he's doing. It seems like he's going to face a choice at some point, and it might be a tricky one, of how, at what point does Trump become so problematic, I can't think of another word, but difficult to deal with, and actually just clearly not acting in Europe's interest, till he has to make some sort of switch. And how would he do that?
Well, he's already done it once in a way that wasn't really noticed at the time. When you had Elon Musk, first of all, cheering on rioters on the streets in the summer. And when I say rioters, what I mean is people who would, if the police lines have not held in Southport, broken through the police lines and burned Muslim worshippers alive in a mosque. People who, if the police lines had not held, broken through police lines in several towns in the Midlands and burned asylum seekers alive. And after that, Musk keeps coming for Starmer. He keeps saying he revives the rape scandals in Oldham and Rochdale from decades ago. And Starmer does fight back. Labour do fight back.
Yes,
in the
they
end.
do.
They don't say, oh my God, this is Elon Musk, this is the Trump family call him the best buddy. He's Trump's best buddy. He's a part of the incoming administration, which he was.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, what a way for an ally to behave, incidentally.
It's quite remarkable.
And Starmer did take him on. He had to.
He had to.
Now,
I agree.
But I agree. There is going to come a point where, suppose, look at Nigel Farage. At the moment, he's looking like Lord Haw-Haw. He's looking like a Quisling. He's supporting Trump. He's very muted on Ukraine, very muted on Putin. Seems wholly out of place in the public debate. Imagine 2 years down the line, we're having spent a hell of a lot more on defence. Lord Haw-Haw was very effective in the Second World War. There was plenty of defeatism in the Second World War. There was, before the Second War, there was Oswald Mosley.
Absolutely. And
instead of the British Union of fascists, we have, as my friend David Aronovich calls them, the British Union of farages. There was a communist front because of the Hitler-Stalin pact. And there are lots of people saying, why are we fighting Hitler?
Exactly. Why is this our war?
Why is this our war?
Yeah.
It's just the Jews making us do it. Why aren't we spending this money at home? I can see that in 2 years' time.
Yeah.
And Farage saying, what kind of fool? What kind of fool is Keir Starmer that he wants to take on Vladimir Putin and Donald Trump at the same time? And Trump and Musk absolutely piling in and backing him up.
But I think it's going to be tricky for Farage, because if you look at their popularity, it's sort of based on something quite nebulous. It's kind of a negative popularity. It's a kind of, everybody's so sick of the system, this whole idea that the Tories and Labour are just the same and all that, and none of them can do a good job, and oh geez, maybe we should put our faith in Farage. But I do think Ukraine, Putin and Trump present Farage with a difficulty.
Sure.
I think it's a real risk for him, and you can see it in the way he's sort of tried to walk a very strange line.
Sure.
You know, it's interesting how there was an interview, I think maybe it was on GB News or LBC. I saw it quoted somewhere, I think it was in the Times. And basically what was really interesting to me was he would have a sort of line that was sort of, oh, why didn't Zelensky wear a suit and all that sort of rubbish. But then he'd sort of say, ooh, well, you know, Russia is the aggressor here, or something to that degree. I'm actually trying to remember what he said, but it was interesting that I felt the whole time like he's trying to walk this line. Like he's trying to do this. He's trying to do something around plausible deniability at some point.
Oh, yeah.
You know, where he can say, and again, it's that sort of thing of like, how long can he go on doing
being
that?
a shifty politician.
Precisely.
Which he always pretends not to be. He
Yes.
pretends to be the plain-speaking man.
The plain
of the people.
speaker, yeah.
In fact, he's probably the shiftiest person in politics at the moment, and the slipperiest. I don't know. I'm just saying that 2 years down the line, you could have Farage, then backed by Musk and his 220 million Twitter followers, backed by the US government. I mean, one point I keep writing to, not criticising liberal colleagues in America, but saying you're missing something here, is they keep saying, some people say, this is just, for all his faults, Trump is being rational.
Yeah.
He's saying, we're overcommitted in Europe. Europe is rich enough to look after itself, which we are. We are.
Yeah.
If only we can get the cooperation going.
Yes,
and
which is critical.
Brexit is just looking every day that passes.
Worse and
not
worse.
just an economic mistake, but a massive strategic and national security mistake.
Yes.
It is. They were all, in the 2010s, the British right was looking in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
They thought our problem was Europe. They thought we can get out of Europe. When we get out of Europe, we have a trade deal with the US. There was all kinds of babble about the Anglosphere. What a load of nonsense that has turned out to be. What a fateful mistake that has turned out to be. We've also been getting closer to Europe, not further away.
Agreed. Do you think that what's happening now, particularly with Trump and America and whatever his relationship is with Vladimir Putin, do you think that's going to, will that fast forward the sort of unwinding of Brexit? Do you think that it will become obvious to sort of everyone that we need, well, I mean, not everyone, but you know what I mean, even the Tories maybe at some point, that actually Brexit was probably a mistake in some sense, at least the Brexit that we got, and that we actually have to move closer to Europe?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I think there are problems. I think I don't think I haven't quite got my head around the world we're moving into. I don't know about listeners, but I haven't. But we're moving into a world where both Russia and America are our enemies,
which is amazing. But yes,
amazing.
I agree.
If suppose we apply to rejoin the EU, Putin could just instruct Viktor Orban to veto our application.
Yeah, that's true.
Absolutely. I mean, if I were in the EU now, I'd be arguing we ought to just expel Hungary.
That could become inevitable.
The EU, as it is at the moment, is still kind of end of history
It is a little. I agree.
It is a bit. History's over. We don't have to worry. And so things like, if you do believe you're in the end of history, if you're in some kind of Kantian paradise of perpetual peace, you don't have to worry about concepts like treason.
Yes.
Or the enemy.
Indeed.
And you've all been brought up, and good progressive people talk. You shouldn't use phrases like the enemy.
Yep.
That's othering. And the worst thing you can do is othering, even if you're othering Viktor Orban. But
Absolutely.
actually, one does need to other Viktor Orban and other Nigel Farage, and start using concepts like treason in its modern sense.
I mean, Orban in Hungary is a big problem for the EU, and you're absolutely right that in some ways it exists in that end of history paradigm where it's a sort of, well, it'll come around eventually, it'll all come good, and it will be fine in the end. And in actual fact, what we've seen is that has not turned out to be the case with Orban at all. In fact, it just continuously keeps getting worse. Yeah.
But to go back to your question, Nick.
Yeah.
If you look at it in stages, I don't blame Starmer at all. I blame him for some things, actually. But first of all, he's just said, I'm going to increase defence spending. I do blame him for cutting the overseas aid budget.
Right.
I thought Annalise Dodds was quite right to resign, and all credit to her.
Yeah.
It takes courage to do that. And but because that's politically easy.
Yeah.
Politically easy to raid overseas aids because starving people in the Horn of Africa can't vote in British general elections.
That's true, yeah.
So, but he ought to do what Macron has done by now. He ought to be making a big speech and saying we're going to have to face up to some very hard realities.
I think he needs to do that. I think you're absolutely right. I don't think there is enough of I think sometimes a weakness of Starmer can be a kind of, well, there's some sort of... It is a bit of the lawyer brain he has sometimes, which is like, well, if this looks good on paper, he doesn't. I think sometimes he struggles to get like, no, this needs to be explained. This needs to be put into some sort of narrative for people. People need to understand exactly why we're doing this. That can be a weakness of Starmer's, I think.
Yeah, well, also perhaps it's a weakness that he's very good at problem solving.
Yes,
I mean he was brilliant. We were talking about the riots. He was brilliant during the riots. He was very good at handling Trump in the White House. But the big picture, the kind of sit down, alone in Downing Street, glass of whiskey, late at night. Where is this country going? What are the problems ahead? And what do I need to do?
Yeah.
Perhaps given he's only been Prime Minister for about 5 minutes, so give him a bit of time. But, there needs to be a bit more like, I do think there needs to be a speech. And then that speech has got to face some hard truths.
Yeah.
Defence spending's got a lot higher. And the hard thing for Labour, because it's very easy for people like me and you to go on about what idiots and fools, and worse than idiots, actually, people on the right have been.
Yeah.
About Brexit. We can do it in our sleep, and I'm sure listeners to your podcast love it.
Yes.
But, I mean, actually, Labour are as complicit.
Well, they've said make Brexit work.
Make Brexit work. They've absolutely ruled out everything. I think Labour have far more leeway on Europe. I think, and that will become clear quite quickly.
I think you're right. I mean, it will be a difficult one because Starmer's been so... he went really hard on that. This idea, we're never going to rejoin the single market in my lifetime, I think he said. There's no customer... Which he didn't have to do, I didn't think. I didn't think that was really required. But anyway, he said it, so I guess he can unwind. But having said that, he did make the big, when he was at the leadership contest in 2020, he had the 10, things he was going to do, and obviously that went by the wayside. So I suppose there's a history there of Starmer being able to... and I think sometimes it's actually played to his advantage that he can sometimes just reverse out of these things and say, well, the time has changed.
Well,
and that's
true,
the thing, the times really have changed.
Yes. They're changing faster than is comfortable for most of us. I mean, it's absolutely true. So I think he can do that. But then the real hard question is, right, okay, we're going to spend a lot more. We're going to have to build up the armed forces. The awful thing that Trump has done is if I were an American, including quite a nice liberal American, I would think, what the hell are we paying for all this for? I've no objection to Americans saying, okay, but it should be done in an orderly fashion, there should be a phased withdrawal. What we're looking at is Joe Biden bolting out of Afghanistan.
Agreed.
On a terrible deal, incidentally, as American progressives will first point, that deal was negotiated by Donald Trump.
Yeah.
The awful deal with the Taliban.
Yeah.
And it's funny, my friend Francis Wheen, my best friends in journalism, Francis always has this argument is, you think there's one thing you know about a politician. It's the media cliche, it's what the comedians say, or whatever I got used to. It's always wrong. Right. So with Tony Blair, he's always driven by spin. Nope, not true. Tony Blair had passionately held beliefs, often deeply weird.
Yeah, absolutely.
Same with David Cameron. No, wrong again. David Cameron was not a nice moderate conservative. He introduced the most bone-breaking austerity to Britain, whose consequences still linger, including bone-breaking austerity on the military. One reason we're in such a bad position now is the Tories didn't do the one thing you'd expect a Tory government to do, and that is protect the military. They didn't.
Yes, that's true.
Any more than they protected the police or law and order. And you think, at least they'll do that. They're Tories. God, what else do they do? They wouldn't do that. So that. And with Trump, well, he's transactional. He's a deal maker. It's the art of the deal. Trump's deals are absolute shite.
Yeah.
They're absolutely awful. For Afghanistan, what he does, basically, is go to the Taliban, go to Putin and say, what do you want? Say, OK, I'll give it to you.
Yeah.
Which is not a deal.
It's true. It's this whole idea of Trump as the deal maker. And actually, certainly in his time as a politician, I haven't seen that at all. In fact, it seems terrible. I mean, a great example at the moment is how he's... what's he doing with Canada? I genuinely, I'm trying to figure out how that could work in his favour or America's favour at some point, and I don't see it.
If you stop looking at Trump as a deal maker, as transactional, it's a cliche you hear about every 5 minutes on the BBC.
Yeah.
If you stop looking as an isolationist, suppose you were an isolationist, you say, look, okay, we've had it with Europe, you're rich, do it yourselves, pulled out in an orderly manner, that would be fine. He's not. He's an active far-right politician. Yeah?
Right.
He's following a malicious far-right foreign policy. So, he's not just saying Ukraine's got to defend itself, he's denigrating Zelensky at every turn.
Yes.
He's behaving, absolutely undermining him every way he can. He's not just saying Germany and Britain must pay for their own defence. He's supporting the far right in both countries. In the case of Canada, America was a very odd empire. I think you can talk about an American empire.
I think you can, yeah, I'd agree.
But it was an empire based on a lot of mutual aid and trust in East Asia and in Europe. There were American bases everywhere, but not American territory. And he's changing the American empire.
Yes.
He wants the American empire to be like the Russian empire now. So he wants to take over Canada. Because this is, Russia, if it is a big empty territory, it's like treat Canada the way the Russians treated Siberia. Oh, there's a big empty territory, not many people there, we're going to take it over. And Greenland the same, take over Panama, it's kind of Monroe Doctrine on steroids, become a sort of the superpower of that's a fantasy. How real it is, I don't know. Off the Americas.
But how does he do that? I mean, I guess the missing piece for me is the tariffs and all that. That's not going to work. I mean, that isn't the thing that's going to make Canada suddenly become the 51st state. I mean, he'd have to do it militarily, which sounds totally mad.
Yeah, well, you never know.
I guess you never know.
I always remember a friend of mine who's an academic, and she said she wrote a brilliant piece about the rise of the far right, and she said it all starts on sort of notice boards on the net,
Yeah.
Arguments about Gamergate, and it's all just blokes just taking the piss out of the liberal elite. And at every point you say, can't you see a joke? And you can also say there was plenty of piss to be taken out of the liberal elite.
Yeah, of course.
There was a ton of piss to be taken out of it. Gallons and gallons and gallons.
Right.
They're awful, they're hypocritical, they are the new Victorians, they tell you what you can think about sex, what you can think about race.
Yep.
And just as in the 1950s, people revolted against
against those constraints.
Yeah, those constraints when they came from the right, they're revolting against them from the left. And that all seems fine.
Yeah.
And it's just South Park humour taken to the nth degree. Can't you get the joke made? But then the joke goes on and on and on, and suddenly... Well, they're not joking about anti-racism and all these stupid courses we have to go on at work. When they joke about anti-racism, they mean it. The joke is, we are racist, and it's not a joke.
Well, the amazing thing is...
And when they joke about, well, Canada, I mean, what the fuck is Canada? Why is it part of the United States? I mean, it's nothing. It's a piss.
Yeah.
It's a ridiculous country. And then suddenly it's not a joke. So it's quite interesting just
the evolution of it.
The way it goes. And right to the last minute, it's come on! You don't take Trump literally. You take him seriously. You don't take him literally. And then one day you do take him literally.
Well, it's actually a lot like what happened with Putin and Ukraine. We were hearing right up to the very moment the tanks sort of rolled across the border from the right across Europe, across America, across the entire Western world. It's ridiculous. Putin's never going to invade Ukraine. This is just this is some woke left conspiracy theory. It's never going to happen. Why is everybody pushing this? This is insane. And it just immediately, as soon as the tanks roll in, the whole narrative just immediately switches. And now it's suddenly like, well, he had to do it. It was NATO. It was whatever else.
Or to reinforce your point, Nick, if you go back to the early 2000s, it was Putin's a kind of postmodern dictatorship. It's all a bit of a joke. He's got guys around him who know all about Parisian philosophy. There's no real opposition. The government funds the opposition, you pay the council. But you know what? If you're a Russian and you just want to make money and have sex, it's nothing like communism. You can be gay, you can have loads of girlfriends, you have loads of money, just keep your head out of politics. It's all fine.
Yeah.
And then over the years, suddenly people stopped talking about Russia and postmodernism.
Yes.
And it's just got darker and darker and darker. And now people are saying, people in Eastern Europe are warning us all the time, it's the Russian Empire. This is not some kind of jokey thing. It's the Russian Empire. It's run by ex-KGB men.
What's the thing I find so amazing about people who say, oh, this idea that Russia would roll into Poland or whatever is just ridiculous. Where are you getting that from? And again, I'm thinking, well, but this is what we've heard at every single turn. What Putin has done is he's just tried it on a little bit more, a little bit more. If you go back to, North Ossetia, all that, that was sort of a test. How does the West respond to this? Crimea was another one. It's just at every stage, he sort of pushes the boat out, pushes the boat out, pushes the boat out.
Historically, every empire you ever looked at, you can say that's how they work.
Well,
exactly. They try it on the way and say, there's a rather nice cliche for British people, perhaps overgenerous, that the British Empire was acquired in a fit of absent-mindedness. Yeah. But it's sort of true.
Yeah.
People, imperialist aggressors on the ground, often on the ground, like Rhodes in South Africa, will see the chance. Hey, we can see what's Zimbabwe. Let's just go and do it.
Yeah.
And if there's no force there to stop it, Hitler was like that.
Well,
Hitler in 1935. Yeah. German troops, when they reoccupied the Rhineland, said if there's any resistance at all from the French or British, you retreat.
Yep.
But there wasn't.
So,
all right, fine, lads. Next one. But all empires are like that.
I mean, there's Sudetenland.
Yeah.
So that's the same thing. Yeah. How are they going to respond? Let's give them the Sudetenland. So at every turn, it's the compromises don't work. It's actually remarkably similar.
So with Putin, say, he's not going to do that. Well, if you work on the assumption that he doesn't, if you behave as if there's no deterrence to stop him doing it, then of course he'll do it.
Yeah.
It's exactly the wrong way to look at it.
Yeah, I'd agree. I completely agree. It's interesting, Erdogan and Turkey, what he's up to. This announcement he's made about how, let's forget about America. That ship has sailed. Yeah. There should be a new sort of continuation of NATO, but, sort of Europe-centered. But obviously, I'm assuming he means Europe and Turkey-centered. Yeah. But what do you make of that? And then when you put in the Syria equation, it's amazing how much the tectonic plates of global politics are moving.
The logic of what I believe about Trump's foreign policy, that it is a malicious far-right foreign policy, that is based on pumping up. So if Farage comes back in a couple of years' time, we shouldn't be defending Europe, we shouldn't be. Then you'll have Trump right behind him, you have Musk right behind him, you have Twitter right behind him. In other words, America is going to become a hostile foreign power. The logic of that is, yes, absolutely, we need to common European defence.
Right. I mean, but I suppose that depends on the idea of British security concerns somehow being covered by America. It all seems in flux at the moment, but I think where the public is very much like, well, we are in the European continent. Obviously, European security is of vital interest. But I guess I'm saying that because I'm thinking about the way Trump handled Starmer, and it was interesting. Clearly, I mean, Trump could have done something similar to what he did to Zelensky. I mean, he could have humiliated Starmer. He could have just cut that dead. But clearly, for whatever reason, he wanted to keep Starmer warm.
Sure. Yeah. No, look, as I said, I fully sympathise with Starmer. Starmer's going to have the generals head of GCHQ, the head of MI6, going, Jesus Christ, Prime Minister, the idea of us coping without America is unthinkable. In fact, we didn't even think it 5 months ago. I interviewed on my own podcast Arthur Snell, who's ex-Foreign Office, and I said, you go to conferences or think tanks, and there's always people doing what ifs and blue sky thinking, and scenario and war gaming, rather over macho way.
Indeed.
And I said, has the Foreign Office or do the security service or the army, has anyone done a war game of what happens if the American alliance breaks down? I just went, no. It was simply incomprehensible to us what has happened could happen. And you've got to remember, in Britain's case, this goes back to 1940. This goes back to Franklin Roosevelt saying, the Brits can't afford to fight Hitler, I'm going to do Lend-Lease.
Yeah.
And that's the start of American involvement in the Second World War. And it's a very, very telling moment in history. The only moment that breaks down is 1956 with the Suez invasion, when Britain, France and Israel launched an unprovoked war to grab the Suez Canal from Nasser's Egypt.
Yeah.
Eisenhower says, you can't do this. Pulls the plug, financial markets turn against Britain and France. The French and the British have entirely different reactions. The French are properly Gaullist.
Right.
They say, bastard Americans, you can't trust them. We're going to build our own independent force. You cannot trust America. We are the exact opposite. We say we hug America close. We can never again be in a position where America can just pull the plug on the pounds and sterling.
We just have to, particularly on security stuff, we just absolutely have to align with America.
So, the French have got a genuinely independent nuclear deterrent.
Yes.
Ours, I noticed the Times was writing about this yesterday. When Margaret Thatcher was fighting Neil Kinnock and CND, they've gone, Britain's independent nuclear deterrent. It's not independent.
Right.
It's absolutely dependent on America. So if Trump wanted to, he could say, let's pull the plug on the British independent nuclear deterrent because it's not independent. You can understand why Starmer is desperately trying to keep the whole thing going and trying to say, okay, all right.
I totally get it from Starmer's perspective. I agree with you. I guess I'm trying to understand what Trump is thinking, but maybe thinking what Trump's thinking is just a mistake anyway.
Yeah.
Maybe at the end of the day, actually, it's nothing. It's as straightforward as he wants a state visit because he'd quite like to meet the king or whatever, and that is literally it. That is all he's thinking. I think that's part of the problem is trying to. This kind of idea, all of his supporters think Trump's playing like, 4D chess all the time and he's got all these moves. And then I'm sitting there thinking a lot of it just seems quite random and not really based on any strategic overview. But I guess, what do you think is the real answer? I mean,
none of it good.
Yeah.
MAGA is a movement of grievance. Of self-pity.
Yeah.
It's funny how...
Which all far-right movements are.
Yes, they are. And it's funny how in our age they've gone on about, snowflakes and trigger warnings and, all these Generation Z and millennials, aren't they all big wusses?
And they can't attack...
This is the most self-pitying movement.
Yes.
But what is extraordinary about America is it's developed a sort of Weimar-esque stab-in-the-back myth.
Yes.
At the time when it's a global superpower...
Yep.
We would kill for the American bloody economy.
Yes.
We'd absolutely kill for it.
Oh, completely, yeah.
So would Europe.
Yeah.
You can say, well, all right, they effectively lost the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. But these were not... It's not like Germany losing the First World War.
It's not even like Vietnam, really. No. I don't even think it's that serious.
No, it's not as bad as Vietnam, by any means.
Yeah.
It's certainly like not the collapse of the Soviet Union. But they've developed this far-right stab-in-the-back myth.
Yeah.
And so all the time they're saying Trump's main concern, their main concern is they're taking the piss. They're saying they want our troops, they want our money. They're just doing it because they're free riders, they're cliques, they're con men.
Yeah.
This is why I don't think those Americans who say there's a real pivot towards Asia understand what's happening, because they'll say about Taiwan, they'll say the same about Japan. And
absolutely. This pivot to Asia thing just seems like... Yeah.
So there's that. And then there is an ideology. I mean, it is funny. it's quite funny the way roles are being reversed.
Yes.
Because during the Brexit referendum, people like me and you are going, "Oh, bloody Farage! Oh, all these leavers! They're obsessed with 1940. They think it's we can stand alone." And now the roles are being absolutely reversed.
Yes,
because people who support Ukraine are saying, "Well, actually, this is a bit like 1940. It's not the same. History doesn't repeat itself, but it does rhyme, as the cliche goes. It is a bit. But you've got to understand as well. So as well as everyone's conning us, and we want money. Yeah. There is a far right ideological motivation to oppose liberal democracy.
Yes.
Why on earth should Trump, Musk, Vance, all these people in the American Congress, why on earth should you expect them to support Britain, France, Germany, even Italy? Why should you get them to support countries with either moderate right or centre-left governments?
Yes.
With bills of rights, with independent courts, with all kinds of checks to stop someone like Donald Trump saying, "Well, look, okay, if you want American support, give my family $100 billion.
Yeah, exactly.
Keir Starmer can't do that.
Yeah.
I mean, in a way, it'd be interesting to say, in the interest of British foreign policy, it might be a good idea if Keir Starmer could just go to the White House and say, "Look, we won't do it for you, Donald, because that's a bit obvious. But one of your sons, we'll just put about $100 billion into his wealth management firm. Then we can sort business out." I suppose it's a problem having a bit of a wussy human rights lawyer. Then you don't really want someone like that, do you?
Well, no, indeed. But also,
he might have scruples. Although, again, everyone Keir Starmer's overridden in the Labour Party and destroyed in the Labour Party on his way to power would say this man has no scruples. So that might be an upside.
Well, I think actually Starmer's quite ruthless.
Yeah, right.
Actually, I think that's part of what he's done, and I think people keep underestimating his ruthlessness. But
they keep underestimating him, full stop.
Well, I completely agree. But actually, one of the things that maybe the state visit, in some sense, is it's sort of the equivalent. It's almost worth what, I don't know, some £10 million contract or something would be worth. Do you know what I mean? For his ego, he wants to have that stuff. He wants to meet the king. He wants to. It flatters his ego.
Oh yeah.
And so maybe it's.
When I was young, Nick, I was a Republican, and now I have to admit I feel really sorry for the poor old king.
Yeah, I know.
And what he has to put himself through for the good of the country. But still, hats off to him.
Well, I mean, the interesting thing as well on that is how I remember writing. A year ago, probably more than that, about how it was amazing to me, this idea of so much of the British right turning against institutions, this being a big thing, turning against the Church of England, the House of Lords, the civil service, you go through the list. And the one thing that they seemed to kind of cling to was the monarchy. That was the one institution. Now they don't like the king anymore. They're saying he's a Muslim or whatever they're saying this week. This idea that he's too political, and he's not.
Well, he's not really though. I mean,
I agree.
I was used to be very critical of him. I'm saying he can't be king because he is too political. He hasn't. Yeah. What's he being political about?
I'd agree, but
I can't think anything he's been political about.
Well, they've said that bit where he went. I can't even remember what it was, but he went somewhere with Starmer and Rayner. Which, I mean, it was a classic thing the king does. He went somewhere. I think it was for a charity. I mean, they're trying to. But the interesting thing is that they are now trying to attack the monarchy, which I like. And that's sort of it, isn't it? Really, in a way, it's a sort of death of classic Toryism. It's a death of the idea of, well, there are things, British institutions are very important to us, and there you go. It's. Yeah, we're kind of seeing the end of that, and actually,
well, I mean, because of the failure of the right.
Yeah,
I mean, people don't talk like this because our media is so right wing, and the BBC is such a coward and cut back institution. But you've had since 2010, you had the poor old Brits have had right wing experiment after right wing experiment enforced on them. So first of all, austerity done to an extraordinary degree. Instead of raising taxes to pay back the debts from the financial crisis.
Yeah.
So then that doesn't work. So you have Brexit, sort of ultra-nationalism, right-wing nationalism. That doesn't work. Then you have Liz Truss with kind of absurd, mad version of Reaganomics. And that doesn't work. So again and again, the right have tried stuff and failed. And it's failed on their terms. So if you're a young Conservative now, you'd say, well, last government, taxes went through the roof. Immigration went through the roof. But instead of looking at your faults, because they can't do that, they say that is because the left has marched through the institutions. They've taken it, and they sabotaged our government. Now that is insane. But you had not Priti Patel, Kemi Badenoch. Her leadership campaign was based on the last Conservative government was too left wing because it was captured by the woke British institutions.
Yeah.
To anyone who's not right wing, the idea that there's a government that gives you austerity, Brexit, and Liz Truss is too left wing is insane. But they genuinely believe that, and so the logic of their position is a kind of it's very like the Marxists or the New Left of the 1960s. When
I'd agree.
I was young. It is. You can't believe in democracy. You can't believe that because capitalism is interwoven into the institutions, into the deep state. But now it's the right that thinks that. And the position where Kemi Badenoch and an awful lot of them have ended up is exactly where Donald Trump's ended up.
Yeah.
You can't trust the CIA. You can't trust the American army. Everything is woke.
Everything's woke. I mean, what you get with Badenoch is even business is woke.
Yeah.
Like, that's the thing. We can't even trust capitalism anymore.
Yeah.
So it's the whole thing's eating itself slightly in this way that now just doesn't really make any sense. And as you say, I think your comparison with the 1960s sort of radical Marxists is kind of spot on because it kind of gets to that same kind of, as you say, stab in the back stuff. Also that like somehow there are shadowy kind of forces that are actually running things, and that's why nothing works. And there's these evil people and secret institutions that are sort of making everything dysfunctional, and somehow if we root them out, everything will be great, as opposed to actually looking at any of the structural problems that we actually have.
I used to be a very heavy drinker, and I went straight, I've gone clean, and I don't drink anymore. And one of the advantages of being on the wagon is you sit there at dinner parties while people around you get more and more pissed.
Yes.
And you're just sitting there like all playing.
Yeah.
And I was at a dinner party with a guy who used to be a permanent secretary, very high up in the civil service.
Yeah.
And he was drinking more and more very nice red wine. I regretted taking the place, but it had to be done.
Yeah.
And he finally just exploded. He said, people go on and on about the British elite and the establishment and the deep state. It's bollocks, Nick. Absolute bollocks. Because if we had a real establishment with balls, we would have cancelled Brexit. We just said, sorry, I know you voted for it. You can't do it. It's a really stupid idea. It's going to wreck the country, hurts the country. You can't do it.
Yeah.
But there is no establishment. If it was a proper establishment, we'd have done that. And I know, Nick, all these people who voted for Brexit would have complained. But you know what? They like complaining. It's what they do all the time. We'd be doing them a favour. There is a deep state in the sense there's a permanent civil service. There's a permanent military.
Yeah.
But again, if there were a proper deep state in America, Trump would be 6 feet under.
Agreed. He would never have become president in the first place.
And going back to all these, going back to the comparison with the late 60s, you remember as a result of this kind of New Left and Watergate, there are endless paranoid thrillers.
Yeah.
And those have informed the right-wing imagination now.
And they have, oddly, yes.
But if it were true, if any of that were true, the American military would just say,
sorry.
Turn up, a couple of guys with guns would turn up and say, Mr. Trump, I'm very sorry, and you too, Mr. Vance,
Yep, absolutely.
We're not having this.
Yeah. Well, it's this idea that, they took out Kennedy or whatever, there's this shadowy... They would take out Trump. I mean, if that was the case... I mean, as in the first time. As in he never would have become president. It never would have happened. Something would have intervened if there was this shadowy establishment that just controlled everything. It's, as you say, it's that, they get what they want. Brexit's the all-time classic example. It's like, you guys wanted this, and then it's like, no, it didn't work because of all this, or these people, or Remainers. It's like, well... what do Remainers have to do with it? They didn't want it to happen. Yeah. If it was that easy to sabotage, it wasn't a good idea. That's just basic politics. In fact, it's actually fairly basic sort of classic Toryism. If something's that easy to wreck, well, obviously it probably wasn't a good idea.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be doing it. The classic actually Tory thing is you shouldn't have grand ideas about history.
Yeah.
You should have conservatism. You should have don't think revolutions work. Basically. And yet Brexit was kind of an attempt at a revolution. Yeah.
The truth, though, the more history you read, the more you realise that the stories Tories tell themselves, which is a very flattering story.
Yeah.
A story I would love to be a part of. Suspicion of grand ideas.
Yeah.
Empiricism.
Yes.
But more belief in common sense, more being wary of, of men who get on soapboxes and scream their heads off.
Yes.
But for a large part of the history of Toryism, they have been the people on soapboxes screaming their heads off.
That's actually true.
You go back to a period I'm thinking about quite a lot now.
Yeah.
The period after the Liberal landslide of 1906.
Yes. It's a Strange Death.
Strange Death of Liberal England. George Dangerfield's brilliant book.
Great book. Brilliant book. Would recommend.
The Tories go mad.
They did go mad.
Absolutely mad. They're encouraging mutiny in Ireland by the army to stop Home Rule. They feel very much like that.
Yep.
You go through Thatcherism when I was young. Thatcherism was highly ideological.
Yes, it was.
Monetarism was an absurd economic doctrine that made no sense and failed.
Right.
Yeah. That nice David Cameron, everyone thinks can't be so bad because he's got a proper accent and went to Eton. That nice David Cameron absolutely insisted we pay for the crash of 2008 because he believed that if he pays out as spending cuts rather than tax cuts, the economy will grow.
Yes.
Complete ideological delusion. Brexit, an ideological delusion which history is now laughing at the British right for, because the ideological delusion was come back. We can become part of the Anglosphere and ally of America instead. And then Liz Truss, who lost, who her own Norfolk voters turned off, and she lost to Labour, as my friend Rob Fall, Professor of Politics at Manchester University, will never tire of pointing out for the rest of his life. She lost by the biggest swing from Conservative to Labour ever,
which is
any election in British history ever.
Yeah.
Full stop.
Yeah.
And yet you still get the entire Conservative media and all these failed Conservative politicians, including Kemi Badenoch, including Nigel Farage, saying, no, the problem is the woke institutions. That's why we failed.
Yeah.
And this is absolutely the same as the German generals in 1918, 1919, saying, we didn't lose the First World War.
Yeah.
The German army was not defeated. It was the socialists, it was the Jews who took over power in Berlin, got rid of the Kaiser, and stabbed us in the back.
Yeah.
It is no different. Instead of the socialists and the Jews, it's the woke. It's the progressives. They stabbed us in the back.
Yeah.
These are hugely dangerous historical ideas. They're also contemptible ideas.
Agreed.
Utterly contemptible.
I'd completely agree. And actually, I think so. I was at Conservative Party. I was at Labour conference as well, but I was also at Tory conference. And one of the things that was really interesting is there was a sort of post-mortem "why did we lose" event. And it was very much split down the middle between people who sort of were saying, look, we just lost touch with people. We lost touch with the voters. We didn't echo their concerns. We didn't get to what people cared about was making the NHS better, creating jobs, the economy. And we just completely lost sight of that. And then the other half of the camp, no, it's a culture war. We need to win the culture war. We need to... the interesting thing is, I think it is a split on the right, but what we've seen from... the last few years is they just sort of let the right, like they let the people who are obsessed with the culture war stuff just get on with it. It's sort of like the pushback from the sensibles is nowhere near enough.
They've got no media.
Yeah.
They're sort of the Times, but not really.
Yeah.
There's Danny Finkelstein.
Yeah.
Who writes about it from a sort of moderate conservative point of view. That's it.
Yeah.
The Times actually going more right wing, very noticeably.
That's true. Yeah, I agree.
There's... I keep thinking of a line from the love song of J. Alfred Prufrock, where Prufrock is this pathetic-looking guy, and he thinks women are keen on him. And there's a line where he says, "Leaning back against the wall, no, that is not what I meant. I didn't mean that at all." And I think about it with Conservatives because they've really, really ridden the tiger.
Yeah, they really have.
They've gone along with people who are actually far right.
Yeah.
Well, all the time saying, "Oh, Nick," and yell, "Nick." You can't use terms like far right. So typical of you fucking progressives, hey.
Yeah.
You call everyone a racist, everyone a fascist, everyone far right. And of course, there are people on the left who do that.
Yeah.
But it means that, and now they've got a real far right.
Yeah.
There was an extraordinary thing. Fraser Nelson, my editor at Spectator, who's a really good guy. I exclude him from all his best editor I've ever worked for, one of the best.
Yeah.
And Fraser's been interviewing by some right-wing chat show called Trigonometry.
I know the clip you're talking about, yeah.
Yeah, and suddenly Fraser's just sitting there, and these guys, Constantine, Chris and something like that. Anyway, they start going, but you can't say Rishi Sunak's really English.
Oh, the Sunak is the whole who is English thing. I mean, incredible.
Yeah, no, but let me just explain to the listeners who
haven't seen this.
Have good lives, happy lives, and are not a part of our world.
Yeah.
So they start saying, well, Rishi Sunak's not English. And Fraser goes, well, of course he is. And they say, well, no, he can't be. He's a brown-skinned Hindu. He can't be English. And Fraser goes, what?
Yeah.
And suddenly, you just get these... It's like the sewers have burst.
Yeah.
And suddenly, all these people Conservatives sort of used or sort of tolerated or thought, well, we're not going to take them on.
Yeah.
Are now in control. So it's very like what... in the last decade, I wrote about... There's a left-wing growing that is anti-enlightenment, pro-dictatorship, really, really soft on movements that, by any reasonable standard, are fascistic, like radical Islam, or what have you.
Yeah.
And people say, "Oh no, Nick, no, you shouldn't say that. Oh, it's just a few people." Or,
exactly. It's a minority.
Yeah, and then they take over the Labour Party.
Yes.
With Jeremy Corbyn.
Exactly.
And exactly what same thing has happened on the right. And there were very few people. I mean, Fraser argued back against these really quite horrible people up again. But there are very few people on the right doing what I did and my comrades did against the Corbynites.
Yes.
I mean, when Corbyn actually is leader, most 80% or more of the Parliamentary Labour Party just say, fuck this. We're not having this. We are the Labour Party. We're not some kind of weird post-Marxist personality cult.
Yeah.
And they stopped it.
Yeah.
The Conservatives haven't done that with Farage, how they attacked Farage. And of course, the classic example, the world historic example, the Republicans did not do it with Trump.
They didn't do it with Trump, and that was big. And actually, they had loads of chances to take out Trump, and they didn't. I'm going back to 2016. And it was just this thing that kept going and kept going. This real fear of stopping that. What was going on? They just briefly on the Sunak as an English thing. What I find amazing is that for so many years, one of the big themes on the right is people don't integrate. Right? We need integration. We can't have this. The biggest problem. We're not being racist. We're just saying there's these communities that do not integrate. Okay, fine. Well, let's have that discussion. And then you're saying, well, no, they can never be English. So what do you want? Do you want integration, or do you? And actually, what generally tends to happen is actually no. It's at least at times it really was racism.
Yeah.
No, that's what it was for some people.
But I mean, I do quite wonder where the struggle is going to come from on the right.
Yeah.
Because all the power, all the money is with the extremists.
Yes.
In journalism, in my world of journalism, as I said, where are the good centre-right commentators? Well, a couple of them times.
Yeah.
But if you want to make money, if you want to do a job, if you want to get on. A friend of mine put it like this. He said, look, you want to write a piece saying alternative for Deutschland.
Yeah.
Oh, they're not really racist. They're not really far right. This is all liberal, progressive. They're just decent people worried about immigration. There is no end of papers you can put that in.
I'd agree.
You know?
Yeah.
The Telegraph, probably the Times now, the Mail, the Express, the Critic, Spectator, on and on. Unheard.
Yeah.
And you get a reasonable sum of money for it, which is important for writers. Yeah.
Correct.
People need to make a living.
Yeah.
You know? If you want to write a piece saying, this is a really dangerous extremist group that Elon Musk is backing. They are so extreme, not even Marine Le Pen will go near them.
Yeah.
You could put it in the Guardian. You used to be able to put it in the Guardian, the Observer. The Guardian now giving the Observer away to some failed Times editor. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that's my world.
Yeah. Well, it's mine as well.
Think tanks. Yeah. Go to think tanks. All funded by American money.
Yeah.
Right-wing think tanks.
A lot of them. Yeah.
And then you look at the. You look at the Conservative Party. You look at the right, and it's WBA's world, where the best lack all conviction and the worst are full of passionate intensity. Yeah. All the energy, all the power is coming from the most extreme people, and there is this kind of purity spiral.
Yes.
Of you constantly keep pushing rightwards, and there's no one to call you to stop.
Also, I think there's just a ready-made audience for that. If you just go with the most simplistic hard right view on something, it's really easy to peddle it online. Hey, if you get lucky, maybe Musk notices what you did.
My God!
And then you've made it. That's the jackpot.
It's actually hilarious watching on Twitter.
Yeah.
All these British far right influencers jumping down saying, Elon, notice me, sitting here in my mummy's basement.
Yeah, exactly. But there isn't. What's the centre right version of that? What's or the centrist version? What's the moderate version of that? I don't know what it is. It's just a much harder slog. You have to really want to do it. And the funny thing is, of course, all the far right trolls are constantly telling you that you must be being paid by Soros or somebody. You're thinking, mate, if I seriously just wanted to make money, trust me, I'd be on the far right, gravy train. Like, if I had no morals, that's what I'd be doing.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think with that, we'll call it a time. Thank you very much, Nick. This was a great conversation.
No, my pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
And we could have just talked endlessly about this given what's going on in the world, but thank you. I'm Nick Tyrone, I always get that wrong, don't I, Bar? I always screw that up at the end, but you know who I am. You're already here. If you watched to the end of this, you know everything I'm about to say. Like and subscribe, all that jazz. Thank you very much to Bloomsbury Radio, the Bloomsbury Institute, and I'll be back at some point. Thank you very much.